We cannot just live our lives by numbers, but there is some significance to numbers. God, and let me put it this way, all of the sciences are subjective to God. So don't think that our intellect or the things that men discover are things that or these formulas and all these things are such that they are taking the lead, so that when people put confidence in the scientific things and allow them to take the lead within our lives, then you're majoring on the subjective and you're eliminating the objective. So God is greater than sciences. God is greater than mathematics. God is greater than all the other things that we could measure things by. These are things to measure things by. But yet, at the same time, they do hold significance. They have a degree of significance. So when we look at all through the Word of God, we begin to see numbers. In fact, there's a book that's called the Book of Numbers. And then there are people that wager their life earnings on numbers, playing the numbers game. You see, but you understand now all of these things take place. But let me tell you something. But there is something spiritually connected to numerology or numbers. And the number 10, as we look at the number 11, this is what we are looking at. What is God saying or doing? As we look at the number 10, which has to do with perfection or divine order. The number 12, which is the number after 11, has to do with perfection of divine government or rule. Now, one, we have perfection or divine order, which is 10, and number 12, perfection of divine government or rule. There's a distinction between divine order and divine government. There's a distinction between the two. We talk about the number 10, which has to do with perfection of divine order, what or how that order is to be established. How is that order to be established? But the number 12 has to do with who is to rule or who is placed in the position of authority. It has to do with the respecting of spiritual authority. So now the Bible even says that the government shall be upon his shoulders. Talks about Jesus Christ, and understand he is the King of kings and the Lord of lords. So now we talk about the number 12. God established the 12 tribes of Israel. We also see that the disciples, there were 12 disciples. So there is some significance to God's government, the divine government of God and how God will rule things. But then we come to the place of perfection or divine order. His objective is to establish us so that our lives are established, that we are brought to a place of order. But then we have this number 11. This number 11, which is one number past 10 and one number short of 12. What is this number 11 all about? It is a transgression because you've gone beyond perfection or divine order. In other words, any movement beyond God's order or divine order is what is called disorder. Do you see this? It is saying that God establishes his order, but then when we transgress, we move beyond the order that has been established. You understood what took place in the Garden of Eden, didn't you? What happened? God gave Adam and Eve, gave Adam authority over all things. He said, you can eat of every tree that's in the garden. He said, but there's just one tree that you better not mess with. Don't you eat from that tree. He said, because the day you eat of that tree, you shall surely die. So now I always say that the fixation, it was upon the tree that was forbidden. It is the focus was upon what God had forbidden. So as a result, eventually we begin to see Eve being tempted or being deceived. She was deceived by the serpent because the serpent said, you'll not die. So eventually Adam ate of that which was forbidden. What did he do? He went beyond the established order of God. He transgressed because he decided to do something that God had forbidden. And understand, this is the transgression that still occurs by many. They say, well, God doesn't necessarily require us to have these constraints placed upon us, but we have the liberty to give expression to whatever we feel is right to do, or we want to do, whatever we will to do. So man's free will is the transgression that the enemy will tempt man to always participate in. It is saying you don't have to be so restrictive. It's okay for you to live your life your way. If you don't like a certain thing, if you don't want to do a certain thing, you're not under any obligation to do it. That's a transgression. It's when men set their own laws and they begin to establish their own standards, it becomes a transgression. So now, the number 11, as it relates to 10, is a transgression beyond God's established order. It is refashioning or a remix of the original from the 10. Number 11, also we see where God is trying to bring us to a place of perfection or divine governmental rule. He's saying so that Jesus, or God, can be Lord over all. His objective is to bring us to a place where we have totally submitted ourselves to Him. Because I'm not talking about a half-hearted submission where we give a portion of ourselves to the Lord, you see, but we're talking about reaching that point where we have totally, absolutely surrendered our all to Him. Now understand, the song, 99 and a half won't do. You get close to it. It's not horseshoes. You can't just get close and expect to be there, but we have to be all together there. So now, what are we saying? 11, which is short of divine governmental rule, I would venture to, or divine governmental rule, it would have to deal with, if you really want to know about this, it falling short of God's standard, thus dishonoring God as being the only potentate or ruler. It is saying that I don't see God as being the only one. God is not the only potentate. God is not the only ruler. But we can settle for that which is less than God. You've not reached this place of surrendering to His divine authority. It has to do with idolatry. If you fall short of the completion of coming to the place of coming under His perfect order or His divine governmental rule, then you have embraced idols. That which is less than God is an idol. That which is less than God is not God. I hope you're hearing this. Falling short of God's standard, not aiming beyond it, will eventually lead to idolatry. Idolatry or the worship of other gods besides the true and living God. And there are so many that will settle for much less than God. They get to the place of saying, okay, God is just too much. God is too big. I need a God that I can understand. I need a God that, and if you can understand Him thoroughly or totally, you can manage Him as well. I need a God that I can manage. But He's God. You have to understand what you're saying when you say He's God. You're saying He's bigger than, He's greater than, He's larger than, He's more powerful than. There's nothing that can compare to Him. There's no way for our knowledge to embrace all there is to know about Him. He's God. And besides Him, there is no other. And don't ever think that somehow, some way, we're going to measure up to Him. No, we'll never. Even when we get there, we're not going to be God.